Well, it's wonderful to be here today with you, Niko. I've been looking forward to this conversation with excitement and a degree of trepidation. You're a man with a big brain, a big heart, and you and I have had some fascinating, demanding conversations on all things strategy, culture, transformation. And you, of course, practice this day in, day out in your very successful pioneering organization, Incandescent. You advise, create, build enterprises to do the world's most important work. And you work with CEOs, founders, innovators, and more. And in a number of our exchanges, we've talked about the frontiers of thinking and practice in all of these areas, agreed on some things, disagreed it too, which I think is healthy. And you, very generously in one of those exchanges, said, "Hey, David, you're doing some work in strategy in a new area, at least for me, and I hope for others. Why don't we flip it around, turn the tables, and I interview you for your podcast?" And I thought immediately, absolutely. And then I thought, what have I let myself in for? In a good way. So here we are, and welcome to the show. And thanks for making the time, Niko.
Thank you so much, David. I feel like it's a gift to be able to do for you what you do so beautifully for others. I think our conversation on the podcast had the extraordinary quality that I think all of our conversations have. There's a way that you have a certain kind of attentiveness that brings out magic in others. And so I love the idea of being able to be sort of Boswell to your Johnson and to explore a question that you're writing about, which may just be the most important question there is, which is, what does it mean to apply strategy to our own lives?
Absolutely. And I guess I came to that just as a starting point for a number of different reasons that we may delve into. But I feel there's a gap and an opportunity to say something on it. And I hope this conversation will refine my thinking and maybe yours and others, or it may say there's nothing there. Who knows? But let's crack on.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me about you is the kind of depth of attentiveness that you have to the everyday, to the question of like, what's going on right now, and what does that require of me? And I think that dovetails with one of the central points in the book that you're working toward, which is that strategy can illuminate the everyday. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I think strategy has often been associated with the boardroom as an elitist activity and has an organizational lens. And all of that may be true. Some of it's still important, of course. Organizations need strategies or should have strategies. But there's often a gap. And CEOs and founders that you and I will work with sometimes get frustrated and say, well, the strategy is not working. And one reason, not the only, but one reason is the fact that people, even with the best intentions, with the best communication, the best cascading of strategy, don't really know what to do differently or to change. Mm-hmm. Even if they're told what to do and given the right encouragement, the right empowerment, actually, how do you make the choices day to day to do something different and better? So that was my organizational lens. There was an experiential lens working with many, many executives and professionals who I think live their life on autopilot, feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, sometimes burnt out, to the degree that actually they suffer mentally, physically, and others around them. And yet when you focus on a day or moments within a day, they soon realize, with a bit of encouragement from me, that they have many more choices about what to do, where to focus, how to show up, who to be, and so on. The classic strategy, or at least some of the strategy questions. And so part of it was a gap, I think, in the strategy practice. That's the more technical answer. And then there's a more personal one where I've lived with, seen, experienced, including myself, missed opportunities to make more of our days.
So tell me a story that sort of brings to life what you mean. It sounds like in a lot of ways, busyness is the enemy, that it's so easy to become swept up in the things that we feel we have to do, that we sort of sweep past the deeper choices that we might actually have. I'd love take us into maybe a moment in your coaching practice that exemplifies what it's like to stop and notice and see the choices and regard them in a strategic way.
Yes. Lots of examples. One in particular, one executive who on every level was successful, flying through her career, high performing. Everyone wanted to work with her. It was getting better and better. And at home, she was the glue. Mm-hmm. She did everything. Everyone around her was thinking, how possibly do you do everything? And if you like, she showed up really well, lots of energy. And it was in a quiet moment in one of our sessions where she sort of paused and said, I can't keep this up. This isn't sustainable. It's not what I want. And so we actually started working through not only her aspiration for her life, which is the bigger picture question, and she struggled with that, but actually, okay, so how does the day work? And she was letting the day work for her and letting everything overtake her. So we started working at very simple things like, okay, so at the beginning of the day, not the classic 5 a.m. sort of stuff, which she wanted to do, but okay, who do you want to be today? What role do you want to play? What are the most important activities that help you, in her case, progress her career? Yes. Make the contribution she wants to her family. What are the moments? And actually, what sort of time does she need for herself to be at her best in the different roles that she played? So what we did, we broke the day up into, if you like, micro moments and articulated the 3 to 5 choices about roles, contributions, the moves she needed to make, the resources that she needed, which was sometimes physical, doing some exercise, sometimes mental, in terms of getting a grip of situations that were demanding. And it didn't mean that suddenly the days became perfect and she went from working 12 hours a day to 1 hour a day. But it meant that she felt in more control, that in the moments that really mattered to her and to those around her, she contributed beyond anything she'd done before. And she reclaimed some space to be more of herself, the more genuine, authentic aspect of herself. And very importantly, to receive more. Because she was so successful, everything was managed, everything was impressive. It was sort of her game. And actually, when you, if you like, calm things down, be more intentional about what you do, you actually create more space for people to come to you with ideas, with their concerns. And actually, so you have an opportunity to be more properly and more deeply engaged in the system that you're in, whether that's the team, the organization, the family.
So David, as I listen to you, 2 words that come to mind are mindfulness and agency. And I wonder to what extent does strategy for a person boil down to those things? Or is there something else beyond those things that makes strategy at a human level?
I think both of those are absolutely critical. But for many people, I think they will be demanding and aspects that people feel uncomfortable with because perhaps they haven't actually done the inner work before or ever, haven't needed to or haven't felt they need to. So what I would add is it's the collection of moves that you make during the day and the choices in those moves that has to be coherent to the agent, to the sense of your own identity, the agency you have, and the clarity of thought. So, for example, if there were certain family moments and family dynamics that you wanted to be more present to, that may be more about your identity as a father or mother or other family member and the contribution you want to make. If that was really clear and in your head, and that was something you aspired to do differently, then there are some really practical, clear choices about when you show up, how you show up in those moments. Many people bring baggage across the day, don't we all? had a bad meeting, come back home, and actually you don't show up in the way. So it's not only how you're thinking, but actually the quality of the moves you make.
I love that. I'm speaking strategist to strategist. I feel like that gets at one of the real flaws that a lot of people have in their mental model around strategy in business, which is this sort of separation of strategy and tactics. And I've always felt that a part of what makes strategy powerful is it tells you where you need to sharpen your tactics. And I hear you describing something very similar at a human level.
Absolutely. What I would add, maybe not necessarily as a additional component, but an aspect of the moves is I think we have to be more intentional about the resources we require to be more strategic during the day, during the week, during the month. And often those things are considered a luxury or something you do separate to the system I've described. And that could be the mental energy you need. That may be the mindfulness point to a degree. But who are the people around you that you need to nourish you, to inspire you? And actually, how can you be more intentional about that? And perhaps put some of the other people on the back burner, if you get my drift. But also just practical elements that I've been working on, and I'm certainly no no exemplar in this area. But what are the nutrition that you need? How do you look after your body effectively during the day in high stakes moments and high performance moments in a way where you're not necessarily trying to run a marathon and get an Olympic gold in your particular sport, but how can you make better choices so when you do need to perform at your best and make the best contribution, you're in the physical state that helps you do that? And many people say, oh, that's obvious, David. Well, they don't. They're dehydrated. They haven't ate something. They've had a spike in sugar. And these may be very small things, but they make a massive difference. Can you and I remember how many meetings where at 3:00 somebody's falling asleep when actually that should be the peak of the day? Yeah, well, they've eaten too many sandwiches at lunchtime. I joke a bit, but you get my drift.
Yeah, I'm struck by just how many parallels there are between organizational strategy and individual strategy, in that so often in organizational strategy, there are matters of finance, some of them quite micro, that are essential in terms of landing the strategy. And strategy is both expressed as the allocation of resources, but also if you get strategy right, inevitably that creates a kind of upward spiral where more and more resources are created. And I hear you describing that at the individual level as well. I'd love to step back now for a moment. And we've been focused on the micro of the day and these moves that you describe, a person opening up as they become more intentional. And I think one of the qualities of a great strategy is that there's a connection between the highest level of elevation, vision, mission, and that granularity of the everyday. And I'd love to hear you reflect a little bit on what does it mean to take a strategic perspective on one's whole life?
Again, I come back to intentionality around what are the important choices I can make now, and in a period of time that's not a day, but it's also maybe not 10 years, and that's obviously a personal choice about time frame, that can move me closer to the person I want to become and the contribution I want to make, the people I want to serve, and depending on the way you think about life, what I want to leave behind. So for some people, it will be maybe quite immediate. Okay, my strategy is around, I need to contribute this to my family, or I'm very career orientated and I want to get from A to B. Or for some people, those are important, but actually their focus is more around, okay, what do they want to be remembered for and who do they want to be remembered for? So I think some questions around framing your aspiration And then actually identifying not only the small moments, as we talked about, but what are the critical choices around where you focus your everything, your mind, your emotion, your love, your time, your money. And actually, how do you make wiser choices about how you use your portfolio? That may be a crude description, but a portfolio of yourself. And for some people, there may be obvious aspects that people focus on. So what are my big career choices, or where do I live? Okay, what type of father or mother do I want to be? What I observe, and I've experienced over many years, is that we often focus on singular questions like that and forget or ignore or don't consider the combinations of those questions together, and hence ignore some of the real trade-offs that are in place or potential complementarities. So a strategic approach to life is not just about the aspiration, but it's around the big picture questions about where do you focus, and also how do you show the best of yourself, given what you know of yourself, what people value in you. Again, I would take a slightly outside perspective. If you look at your work, your family, your community, the systems you're in, what does it most need from me? And how can I make sure that my life is congruent to that?
Those are very big questions, almost at the core of asking, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be me? And as you talk about that, it makes me think about the occasions for strategy. That in the world of companies, often this comes up. People wonder things like, well, should we have a new strategic plan every third year? Do we do strategy when something significant is shifting in our market? Is it in the context of a transaction? And the same things can come up in terms of as an individual. When do I make the time and space and apply the effort to work things through things that are as deep as what you were just sharing? And I know a part of what you've been revisiting as you've worked on this book is your own occasion to begin asking these questions in a deeper way. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, I think if the brain damage my son suffered shortly after birth hadn't happened, I think I may have come to some of the realizations I've described at some point in my life, but probably not as soon and probably not as deeply. Even though, let's be really clear, I haven't figured it all out. I mean, who has? But my son suffered catastrophic brain damage, as I said, and is now a lovely 13-year-old boy with severe disabilities, and he'll need care for the rest of his life. That wasn't on his plan, our plan, and that shook up every aspect of our life. And for a long time, I was masking a lot of that at work and being a strategist at work to the best of my abilities and doing, I think, pretty well. And then at home, I was being unstrategic and just getting through whatever I needed to do. And over time, it became unsustainable for myself, my wife, and others. And there were moments I noticing is so important, where I would be a little bit too short with somebody, or I'd miss something. And over time, that they accumulated to just a feeling like this is not right. I've got to get a grip of this, otherwise something worse will happen, or I will show up in a way that I wouldn't be proud of. And so over time, I started reclaiming control over what felt like a system completely and utterly out of control. And I can't fix my son's brain damage. It pains me every single day in different ways. But I can control the time I spend with him, the energy I give, and the adventures we try. So over time, I started to claim control, make some real choices about how I spent my time, who I spent it with. I found my energy much more sensitive as a result of fatigue and stress than it used to be. And hence being around people who, they didn't need to be my therapist. I wasn't looking for that, but people who lifted me up was more important than it used to be. And also people who I found highly transactional and mercenary without any shed of personality, at least at face value, very, very dispiriting and de-energizing. I had to be much more intentional about that. And so I guess over time, I began to notice the moments, make sharper choices. And then over time, a number of years, it took me many, many years, realized that not only professionally I wanted to do something new and bold and demanding and harder than I've ever imagined, and I wanted to create more flexibility for the life I've described. And I left, the firm that, frankly, at the age of 46, after 14 years as a partner, everyone thought I was completely mad. And so that was the jolt, a long jolt. And then since then, it has been a process of discovery, experimentation, and I won't go into all of it because we'll be here for hours, but reaching a 50th birthday for me was important in terms of thinking about these questions again. So that's a bit of the journey, Niko.
One of the things that strikes me as I listen to you describe a process that unfolded over so many years is sort of the arc of working one's way toward a strategy as I experience it in a business setting. I experience that there are often a set of some chapters that a strategy process goes through. And maybe they play out differently in one situation or another, but you might think of a classic story having something like 5 chapters to it. In the first chapter, the organization sets off, and often they have some well laid out process, and maybe there's a consultant who's invited into the scene with them. And then in the second chapter, there's a kind of dawning recognition, which comes up in your story just now too, about facing questions that are hard enough that we're stuck.
Yes.
And, if there's one big test in a corporate strategy process, as I've experienced them, it's if you skip that second step, it doesn't work. And you stay with that step for some period of time. And one of the ways in which I think clients are most easily dissatisfied with the best consultants is that they want much more definitive answers than a good consultant could give them about exactly when and how they're going to get unstuck. But in a good strategy process, the stuckness is worked through, and there's a third chapter which is about some kind of insight that begins to unlock the problem. It isn't in itself usually the answer, but it enables a productive body of work that then takes one toward a fourth chapter, which is about conviction. And that conviction works through to what feels like closure on strategy, which then, of course, inevitably leads to a fifth chapter in which that conviction is brought out into the world. And there's a new set of puzzles and dilemmas as it becomes clear of how much remains to be determined about what that strategy really means in practice. And, I'm curious, as I describe those chapters, how similar or different you experience that arc to be, either looking back on your own experience that you were just sharing, or the experiences of others you've observed and guided.
No, I've signed up to the arc. I guess the emphasis on each chapter, and sometimes this may go against a little bit the sequence can vary.
What I'm describing is sort of more linear than it presents itself in real life.
Yes. I found, so I didn't have, just to talk around, I didn't have this moment where I just sort of sat down on on a beach or in a yoga retreat and said, okay, this is my aspiration for my life. It was actually that based on this was not working for me personally. And then also, if I did one thing right, I made many mistakes, I looked around the people around me and the people, if like further afield, and saw people who I thought, if they can get a grip of their life in frankly more difficult circumstances,
Sure.
or then I can and should. And then I also saw, be careful what I say here, but colleagues, sometimes clients, who were, as I said, living on autopilot to the point where they hadn't made conscious choices, and they were successful and wealthy in a narrow sense, but they weren't living because they had failed to make some of those choices. So how you identify the problems and the challenges, I think, is a really important aspect of the process. And then giving yourself permission to flip quite quickly. So in the last year or two, there were a number of problems I felt. And then I then started working with somebody, and it was just that decision which suddenly, partly the quality of his work and his coaching therapy, partly the fact that it was just quite a different experience. So I put myself in a new space that actually created the conditions for me to move into a different headspace, which was not firefighting and problem solving, but exploring. And that shift of I'm now a creator and a maker, not just a coper.
I think that gets to one of the principles that you articulate. Like you told a story that was born out of a certain kind of deep crisis that you experienced, and in a way that might be partly advice to your younger self. Part of what you counsel is not to wait for a crisis, and part of what you do in the book is to try to create a framework and a process around aspire, choose, thrive. Tell us a bit about how, if at any moment, because all of us are on autopilot some of the time, probably much more often than we'd care to acknowledge or admit, how can we find ourselves there, and without there necessarily being any large precipitating event, apply a framework and elevate our thinking to the strategic level that you described?
Yes. For me, the act, if you like, act strategically. So that was my semi-clever trick, if you like.
And part of what I like about that is people think strategy is thinking, but really strategy is much more thoughtful action.
Yeah, and that was the intention. So at least it worked for you, and I'm hopefully maybe for others. My principle is that this is a way of thinking, being, and doing that you can apply throughout. So, if you like, pick whatever is happening in your day that is particularly enlightening your thinking. Wow, this is great. I want more of it. Or is a particular bugbear or frustration. And so for some people, it might be, I get triggered by this person or this situation. I don't show up and I get frustrated and I come back with the tail between my legs. Okay, so aspire. So what is the problem going? What is happening? Identify the problem and who you want to become. So I don't know how to handle that person who's always aggressive. Okay, I want to aspire to be somebody who is more calm and wise in that moment. Okay, so what's the choice? The choice is showing up in a different way. The choice is moving to a more curiosity mindset than a defensive mindset as you work with that person. I.e., you don't suddenly become, oh, they're attacking me, and then go red in the face. It can be, okay, let me try and understand where they're coming from. We ask some questions. And then the thrive aspect is, okay, so how can I prepare for that particular moment better? Okay, you might role play it or rehearse it, or you might make the move first and then think about mini scripts of what you might want to do in certain situations. All of that sounds like a lot, But when you start practicing using this framework, it becomes 1 or 2 minutes of preparation. And yet, over the course of a 1 hour or 2 hour meeting, for example, it could radically change how you feel, how you show up, the contribution you're making, the reputation you build. So it's a prompt to expand your horizons, thinking beyond the moment. It's to get deeper into the problem that you're really facing. And then it's expanding or creating more optionality in terms of the choices you have, and then getting savvier about some of the moves you make. And I would call it increasing, and I'm borrowing Roger Martin's word on this. This is about increasing your odds of success. It's not suggesting that you become rigid and you architect something that, oh, this is going to be perfect and it's going to work. Life's not like that. But what I find is when you practice them day in, day out in different shapes and forms, your confidence grows. You tend to go on the front foot. And actually, you search out insight, input, challenge, because you are genuinely curious about what other people can contribute to help you achieve the aspiration of yourself, the team, the family, the organization, whatever your field of reference is.
One of the things I find myself thinking about as you describe all that, I think people can view strategy as a single grand thing, like a big idea that then guides everything. And what I hear you describing is a kind of a process by which one ladders up from smaller insights eventually to larger ones, expanding a sort of frame of action and sharpening a level of intentionality all along the way.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
I think you're beginning to address, when I think about what must it be like to be listening to this conversation right now, that probably some people find what you're describing to be inspiring, and some people probably experience a certain kind of resistance. And when I think about what might that resistance be, where could it be coming from? I think one of the objections, we call it the objection regarding spontaneity, is well, I'm not sure I want a strategy because that could sort of restrict my ability to live life dynamically. I spend too much time focused on my plan, on my fixed idea, and not enough time sort of living life as it comes. And I think you're beginning to kind of dissolve that objection. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about, can strategy enable spontaneity, or is there a trade-off between the two?
Oh, I think it can enable it. Once you have practiced and honed your skill of considering and making choices. Because if you have a clearish or clearer life strategy, and then you cascade it as you described, when either you create opportunities or opportunities come new to you, so, oh, why didn't you try this new project or role? Or perhaps there's a community role that you might want to do, or something changes. If you've gone through a process of judging, assessing, considering the merits of different choices in order to form what you've got, you've effectively got some muscle. I'm mixing metaphors here. And so your mindset is, okay, so this is new, this is exciting. You have a curiosity mindset, you're open to new ideas. Then the question is, based on what's important to me now and what I think I want to become, how would that be better? What would I need to believe? What would I need to do? What would that require of me? You go through a series of questions that actually means you are more, I think, objective and deliberative, and then more open to trying something. And you might say, okay, I'm not sure at this stage, but I'm willing to invest an aspect of my time and my attention on exploring this side hustle or this venture or something that sounds interesting. And I'm going to put some bounds on it. and then I'm going to judge it in a month or two's time. Now, for me, that's not rigidity. What that means is you're making a conscious choice about experimenting and then working out over a period of time, does it suit me? And if it does, okay, I need to reassess things. So I agree. A rigid strategy, which is sort of taped on the walls, this is what I'm going to do. It doesn't matter what's happening in the world, how I'm feeling. I mean, this nonsense doesn't work. But similarly, going through life with a very flexible, dynamic approach, I see a lot of people doing that. And then at certain moments, just stopping, if they do stop. Say, okay, where is this taking me? What is this? What is it giving me? How am I feeling about it? And often the answer is there's some form of emptiness or gaps there that if you are more deliberate in the process and you actually had a more systematic mindset, would mean you would, I think, either go deeper or allow yourself some room to move into a new space.
When you talk about that emptiness, I think that's something that every human has experienced many times. And I think that gets to a second, maybe deeper source of resistance that people might feel. Not so much resistance to the ideas that you're describing, but resistance to the work that might come on the other side of embracing those ideas, which is the notion that it's so logical what you say. And how could it not be better to be more intentional in the ways that you describe? And yet, because I feel some of that emptiness in this moment, it just doesn't feel possible to begin the work that you're describing, because at this moment, I just don't know what I really want. And that makes it hard. Like, if I only knew, then I could derive all kinds of strategic implications from that knowledge. But what do I do about not knowing what I want?
So I think there's something around chunking down the feeling into the smallest possible piece where you may not know what you want, but there may be a source of frustration or a problem you're feeling right now. Okay, I'm not progressing in my life. I'm not enjoying aspects of my life. I'm busy all the time. There's an aspect which you viscerally feel. Identify it, notice it, name it, and then say, okay, so what is the smallest possible shift I think I could make? Not trying to cover everything, but it might be, I'm just feeling sluggish at the moment,
Mm-mm-mm.
or I haven't felt excited at work for a long time. So a specific feeling. And then the question is, okay, coming back to the moment and today, what's the smallest thing I could do? Okay, so perhaps I could move more. This may sound very simple. I could move more. I could ask more questions. I could reach out to that one person I think is amazing and just observe them. Not ask for the catch up, not ask for mentorship, just observe them. So what you're doing is being clear about what you don't want, identifying the beginnings of an opening that you think, if you like, not only could make you feel better and actually try and change that emotion so you're more able and open to think about what you do want, but also starts building that muscle and that practice of, if I've done it once, I can do it again, and I can do it again, and I can do it again. And to be clear, in the journey I've painted on myself and on other executives and advisors, I didn't do this all in one go. I picked particular areas that either I had an aspiration, I really want to do this, and I did have that, but also aspects that were, what is the biggest blocker that is getting in the way, and how do I start chipping away at it? What's the smallest chip that I can take out?
Something I often think about is the idea that all progress begins with dissonance, that there's something that feels like it is out of step with what we intend, or out of step with the other things that we've set into motion, and that looking at that, even in the smallest way, can be unlocking. And I I hear you describing something very similar, that in ways we want to make strategy as accessible as possible by linking it to something that is always with us. There's always some form of dissonance, and you're just showing us how it is that we can begin to harness that to move ourselves forward.
And the one rider I'd add to that, or maybe additional point, would be, I've talked a lot about us as individuals. The move you can make would be, okay, if you are really struggling in whatever shape or form, either with the question or struggling as yourself, you might know that you feel better when you hang out with certain people. So you don't know any of what I've just described, but you know that spending time with another person, either because of what they give you, the energy they give, maybe the advice, just spending time with somebody else may not give you the answer, but has some form of catalytic feeling for yourself. So, and I have found over the years, both professionally and personally, making clear choices about not only the good people who lift me up, but the people who maybe have a different perspective, a different skill set, a life experience, and taking a risk and saying, okay, so if I spend a bit more time, I think I'm more likely to change my mindset or learn something than hanging around with the same type of people or doing it all on my own. For some people, that actually is an easier entree into this area. So other people than always trying to think, oh gosh, if you're overwhelmed, busy, depressed, or whatever it is, it's very hard to do the work all on your own.
In this story that we've been exploring, we sort of started with you're being a strategist of organizations. And then we've gone deep into how strategy applies at the level of the individual. And I know much of your working life is still with organizations. And I'm curious about how the questions that you're asking at an individual level connect back to your work with organizations and what you see as making a difference in terms of organizational success.
So for the people who are sponsoring, creating, cascading strategy, what I've described, not only role models what they would expect from other people, but also means that they perform at their best with less and enjoy it and create successes. They create a larger raft of successes. So there's a sort of the leadership aspect. But then as I come back to change programs, I don't like the term, but some form of large scale transformation, I see too much effort going into large scale broadcast style communication that to some degree is necessary, or strategy. All the questions that you and I know about: where are we going? Why is it happening? But the big shift is actually focusing on the team level and then the individuals within it, and asking the questions of, okay, what is going to motivate somebody to move, to shift, to try, to leave something behind? What do they need? What's going to stop them? All the questions we've identified at the personal level, if you have people who work with those people who identify those questions earlier in the process, what I see and I know is that you not only increase the odds of the strategy being successful, but you nurture a group of people who can be more strategic in themselves, and hence they are more productive, they're more focused, and they're more engaged, they're more alive at work. And so, and at a time when many people feel nervous about their roles, whether it's because of the economy, the state of their organization, both the substitute nature and the complementarity of AI and other technologies, if you have people who are more confident about what they're there to do, the roles they play, more capable in the skills that only they can do and they can do with the technology, you increase your odds of the organization being successful. And that's the big shift that I see.
I love how we've traversed a full circle from the birth of this inquiry to what it means on a larger scale. And that at the center of it all, as I hear you describe it, is the question of how we can each be most alive, how we can take the dead moments where we're on autopilot and discover greater vitality, and how if we build organizations where each of us are able to do that more consistently, the whole will be able to reach greater insights and achieve greater performance. There's so much there for all of us to think about. I'm curious, as we await the book that you're still in the process of writing, are there a few questions that you would most want us to be thinking about?
There are some deeper questions that I think, even if it feels uncomfortable, because they're either new or the answers may be difficult to work through, that deserve attention. There's questions around, who do I want to serve? What contribution do I want to make to the people that matter to me? What do I want to leave behind? I think intuitively we know a lot of the answers, but we haven't given ourselves permission to start answering those questions. And when we start doing that, I think we start giving ourselves more space and more agency, coming back full circle, to actually make choices that will help us move in that direction. So there is what I call some careful soul searching. I would also say, on the flip side, that the questions around, okay, focus on a moment that you know you can show your best, or a moment that just is repeating and drags you down. Go to the extremes of a day and start practicing what we've described. What is the issue? What do you want to become? What are the choices you face? And what resources will help you make the moves you really need to? Just start doing the work. Start doing the work.
As I reflect on the distance that we've come in these 45 minutes, I feel like every interaction with you, David, is kind of a further window into the power of conversation. And a part of what I take away, and I could imagine your listeners might take away, is that at the heart of everything that you've described is a question about how might we converse better with ourselves, with the right others who bring out the selves we want to be. And just like organizations that are grounded strategically are in deeper, better conversations with the realities around them. How do we let our own day-to-day conversations with our realities open us up to who we are, who we intend to be, who we could become?
There's something about being more comfortable with discomfort, because I have been, during this conversation, both intrigued and uncomfortable, and many other emotions, and I'm hugely grateful for the space you created, and I'm okay with that, because some of the questions I've not had the full answer, and I'm aware of that. But I think you and I know each other well enough now, and we have framed this conversation such that we are on a journey of discovery. Yes, we're sharing our expertise. We've been around the block a bit, right? But we're still learning. And I think if you're comfortable enough to have a go and know what you don't know, and then work with people where you can be explicit about the fact that there may be points where We simply don't know. Or we may disagree. Or actually, we need to go away and reflect more. I think you create the conditions under which people can think more deeply, express themselves in the way that they want to, and create a deeper connection of trust in yourself and between people. Because everything we've described requires proper thought and action, and there's a leap of faith at many times. And if you have people around you who you think, if you like, unconditionally back you, they may not agree with you. They may not think you're doing all the right, making all the right moves, but they have a belief and a care for you. I think they create the headwinds, if you like, of goodness and momentum that actually can only serve you as you take the next steps forward in your journey. And so for me, in a nutshell, it's around knowing what you need for yourself to do the best possible thinking work, and then being more explicit with the people around you about the nature of the dialogue, the nature of the work, and being forgiving of the pauses, perhaps the distractions sometimes, because you believe in yourself and you believe in the process of the work. Because the flip side, Niko, would be if it's all too comfortable and easy, we're all completely fluent, and the answers are perfect, and everyone can predict what everyone's going to say. It becomes theatrical, and
Sure.
it means you're probably not tackling the real problems and you're not trying hard enough.
So true. So true. I feel like maybe success in this inquiry is to feel, as I feel at the end of this conversation, which is I'm one step closer, and one step closer is enough. Thank you, David.
Thank you. That was a beautiful conversation. My head's buzzing with both what we covered, the time and investment and care that you put into this, and what might become. I'm genuinely moved. Thank you, Niko.
This is great fun. I'm so glad that you gave us the opportunity to do this. And I'll look forward to reviewing it from the sidelines once you've added your beginning and your ending. And I feel like this is a conversation that we can probably both use to spark all kinds of thinking and all kinds of conversation with different people in our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.